Have you ever wondered what it truly takes to change the world? It's not just about having a great idea. It is about believing in it so fiercely that you can convince kings and queens to bet their fortunes on you. This is the story of a man who did just that. A man whose name is etched in history. Christopher Columbus. In the late 15th century, the world felt big, but the known world was small. The lucrative spice trade with the East was dominated by land routes, controlled by hostile powers, and a sea route around Africa was a long and perilous journey. European powers were desperate for a direct path to the riches of Asia. It was in this climate of ambition and uncertainty that an Italian sailor from Genoa, Cristoforo Colombo, came forward with a truly audacious proposal. Columbus was a skilled navigator, a self-taught scholar who had devoured books on geography and cosmology. Unlike most of his contemporaries, he believed the world was a sphere. This wasn't a new idea ancient Greeks knew, but Columbus took it a step further. He drastically underestimated the Earth's size. Based on his calculations, he believed that sailing west from Europe would be a much shorter and faster route to the Indies than sailing east around Africa. He thought Japan was only about 2,400 nautical miles from the Canary Islands. With this grand vision, Columbus needed a patron. He first pitched his enterprise of the Indies to King John II of Portugal in 1485. Portugal was the leading maritime power of the day, pioneering the route around Africa. Their experts reviewed Columbus's proposal and, correctly, pointed out that his math was wrong. They believed the ocean was far too vast to cross. They rejected him. Undeterred, Columbus packed his charts in his dreams and moved to Spain. Spain in the late 1400s was a nation in transition. The Catholic monarchs, Queen Isabella I of Castile and King Ferdinand II of Aragon, were in the final stages of the Reconquista, the centuries-long effort to reclaim the Iberian Peninsula from Moorish rule. Their focus and their treasury was on the war. For years, Columbus lobbied the Spanish court. He was persistent, charismatic, and utterly convinced of his own destiny. He made connections, argued his case before royal commissions, and waited. He was rejected once, twice, and was on the verge of leaving Spain for France when a final plea was made on his behalf. In January 1492, Granada, the last Moorish stronghold, fell to the Spanish. With the war over, Isabella and Ferdinand were finally ready to look outward, to compete with their Portuguese rivals. They saw a glimmer of possibility in Columbus's mad-sounding plan. It was a gamble, but a relatively small one. If he failed, they lost a few ships. If he succeeded, the rewards would be immeasurable. New trade routes, untold wealth, and the chance to spread Christianity to new lands. In April 1492, they agreed to fund his expedition. Columbus was granted the title Admiral of the Ocean Sea and promised a share of all the profits. The stage was set. On August 3, 1492, a fleet of 3 small ships departed from the port of Palos de la Frontera. There was a flagship, the Santa Maria, a larger, slower cargo vessel, and 2 smaller, nimbler caravels, the Pinta and the Nina. Can you imagine the scene? The sails unfurling against the morning sun, the cheers and tears of loved ones on the shore, and the vast, unknown Atlantic stretching out before them. After a brief stop in the Canary Islands for final repairs and supplies, they set sail into the open ocean on September 6th. 4 days that stretched into weeks, they saw nothing but an endless expanse of water and sky. The crew grew restless. This was the longest anyone had ever sailed, out of sight of land. Fears of sea monsters, of sailing off the edge of the world, or simply of running out of food and water began to take hold. They were in completely uncharted territory. Columbus was a master of psychology. To maintain morale, he kept 2 ships. One, for his own records, showed the true, long distance they had traveled. The other, which he showed to the crew, deliberately understated the mileage, making them believe they were closer to home than they actually were. But even this deception couldn't quell the rising panic. By early October, the crew was on the verge of mutiny. They had been at sea for over a month and had seen no sign of land. They demanded that Columbus turn back. Columbus negotiated. He asked for just 3 more days. He promised that if they didn't find land in that time, he would turn the ships around and head for Spain. It was a desperate bargain, but it worked. And then, the signs started appearing. They saw floating branches, then birds that weren't seabirds, and finally, a carved piece of wood. Hope surged through the exhausted crew. The air itself seemed to change, smelling of earth and vegetation. In the pre-dawn hours of October 12, 1492, a lookout on the Pinta named Rodrigo de Triana shouted the words the entire crew had been praying to hear. Tierra, tierra, land. At sunrise, Columbus and a landing party went ashore. He believed he had reached the East Indies, somewhere near Japan or China. He called the native people he encountered Indians, a misnomer that would stick for centuries. The land he had found was an island in what we now call the Bahamas, which the native Taino people called Guanahani. Columbus christened it San Salvador, or Holy Savior. He hadn't found the grand palaces of the Great Khan or the spice markets of Asia. Instead, he found lush islands, crystal clear waters, and people who were, by his account, peaceful and generous. He was fascinated by them, but his primary goal was still wealth. He saw them wearing small gold ornaments and became obsessed with finding the source. For the next 3 months, Columbus and his fleet explored the region, sailing through the Bahamas and along the coasts of what are now Cuba and Hispaniola. The island that today is home to Haiti and the Dominican Republic. The journey wasn't without disaster. On Christmas Eve, the Santa Maria ran aground on a reef off Hispaniola and had to be abandoned. Its timbers were used to build a small settlement named La Navidad, where Columbus left about 39 of his men, promising to return for them. This became the first European settlement in the Americas. With only the Nina and Pinta left, and with samples of new plants, a few captive native people, and small amounts of gold, Columbus began the long journey home in January 1493. The return voyage was brutal. The two ships were separated by a violent storm, and for a time, each thought the other was lost. But both miraculously survived. Columbus, aboard the Nina, finally limped into a port in Portugal, and then, on March 15th, 1493, he arrived back in Palos, Spain, the same port he had left over 7 months earlier. His return was a sensation. He paraded through the streets of Barcelona to meet with Isabella and Ferdinand, displaying the parrots, the strange plants, and the indigenous people he had brought with him. It was a hero. He had done the impossible. He had sailed west and reached the Indies. Of course, he hadn't. He had stumbled upon an entire hemisphere previously unknown to Europeans, a new world. The consequences of that first voyage were immediate and monumental. It triggered a wave of exploration, conquest, and colonization that would reshape the entire globe. It initiated the Columbian Exchange, the vast transfer of plants, animals, culture, technology, ideas, and diseases between the Americas and the Old World. While Europe gained new foods like potatoes, corn, and tomatoes that would revolutionize its diet and population, the Americas were devastated by diseases like smallpox, to which the native populations had no immunity. Columbus himself would make 3 more voyages, always convinced he was in Asia, always searching for the fabled riches he had promised his patrons. His legacy is incredibly complex and controversial. He was a brilliant and daring navigator, a man of incredible self-belief and perseverance, but he was also a brutal governor who initiated policies that led to the enslavement and death of countless indigenous people. His first voyage, however, stands as a singular moment in history. It was a journey born from a mathematical error, fueled by unyielding ambition, and achieved through a combination of skill, luck, and sheer force of will. It didn't just open a new sea route, it connected to worlds that had been separate for millennia. And in doing so, it set the course for the modern age we live in today. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the biggest changes in history begin with one person and one very bold idea.